So first of all, thank you for your questions. Very happy to have some, and welcome everybody. Okay, let's start. And Olga will start from the beginning. And she would like to repeat herself a little bit. Because when this lecture began, Olga said that this course, the series of lectures, is dedicated to the realization of the immortality. And she touched topics like enlightenment, breatharianism. So by breatharianism we mean living without food, physical intake of food. And then further we touched the topics of pranic breathing and sexual tantra. And in the previous talks, Olga described the possibilities of making our task easier, our task of transformation. But she is not didn't give the method itself of the transformation. And the last few days, Olga watched a lot of videos about Kriya Yoga, and this teaching was spread 150 years ago. And the founder of this Kriya Yoga was Lahiri Mahasaya. And in the last century, a great help in order to spread this information, a great help was Yogananda. Yogananda was a great help in spreading of this. The legend goes like the immortal Babaji gave this teaching to the people. And this teacher, the Himalayan Babaji, he is present in our world for many years, many years. And he taught people who later on became teachers themselves and immortal as well. And right now they are together somewhere in the Himalayan. But neither Yogananda or Mahiri Yohasai did obtain the immortality. But at the same time, this teaching of theirs is indeed very deep. And in the world there are a few traditions of yoga. There exist a few deviations, so to say, of yoga. For example, Bhakti Yoga, Dharma Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raja Yoga. And all practices which are connected with breathing, for example in Kundalini Yoga, are based on two principal techniques. The one is Anuloma Viloma, and the other is Kumbhaka. And all the other pranayamas, for example the breath of fire, they are helping tools. Prastrik is the same as well. So why did Olga start with Kriya Yoga? Because this is indeed very deep and profound teaching, which proved its efficiency during 150 years. Olga watched the videos on the internet about people who are within this tradition and who officially have the right to give this knowledge. As Olga was hearing the teachings, the methods itself, she understood that there is actually no difference between their understanding of the processes and hers. But she observed a great, incredibly big difference in terms of execution of the techniques of the practice itself. And she discovers certain mistakes which are done during centuries, so tradition after tradition, and and these mistakes make the practice dangerous. And Olga allows herself to remind you why she has this knowledge, where it is coming from. A few years ago, Olga's physical body, or Olga's body, dissolved in light. And in this process, all the other processes became obvious. And during the last few days, as Olga dives into this topic, she realizes that it is necessary to create a new teaching. And it is not a teaching in terms of creating a new practice, but rather in how to prevent us from making mistakes, how to help the teaching itself. And in order for these practices to become safe, it is necessary to begin with enlightenment, or the realization of the work of the mind. And given the point, or aside from the point that Olga's teaching allows for the realization to take place after 7 days of practice, so to put it simply, 7 days are at least necessary for the body to merge with Absolute, for the body of light to merge with everything. But to endure such an intense work within oneself usually is not possible. We need, in order to endure all this process, one needs to practice at a very high level of awareness and a very high level of acceptance and trust. That's why enlightenment is the first sita, or the first step that one needs to make on this path.
Почему во всех восточных учениях просветление ставится на первое место?
And why in all of the Eastern teachings enlightenment stays in the first place? Because enlightenment eliminates any possibility of identification oneself with an illusion. And by doing so, the flow of energy is directed in, or is flowing in its original on way. One single thought is capable of redirecting the whole stream and abstract the whole practice. And Olga's practices cannot be compared to anything else because they have one principle. The principle of non-acting. Many teachings are speaking about this non-acting, non-action. And still at the same time, their practices are causing some kind of a force for the body, for the mind, so they are forced to some kind of an action. For example, asana, or pranayama, kumbhaka, alinoma, viloma, where you have to interrupt the individual rhythm of the breathing, and bandhi as well, which we had in the last talk. Olga has 3 practices that allows you to merge your mind with inner processes, to make them into resonance, and then an actual observance, non-action, and observation, research on these processes takes place. And these practices are concerning especially the work of mind. And then the next practices which are coming, they are concerning the work with energy. Next comes on the physical level, cleansing of the body, what we call Breatharianism. The non-action on the physical level, so to say. And Olga understands that different yogis, different teachers are practicing for centuries. Maybe Olga is not 100% right, so to say, when she says that you can get results after months, after weeks. Maybe it is more right to tune the one on for work which takes years, which takes not a limited amount of time. Because people start to rush and they try to jump over certain steps which have to take place. But at the same time, the practices are so effective so that they can give results very quickly. And from this point of view, these results are an additional present, so to say, bonus. What do we know about the breathing? The question is, if the time is eternal, what's the rush? It's an excellent question right now. And we can observe it, research it from 2 positions. From one position, those are the processes happening in the universe. The universe has a definite end. It has a time of appearance, and this means that it will disappear as well. From the position of a human being, of course, this time is an eternity. And furthermore, if we are talking about the human position itself, the time is not eternal. If the fact of eternity of time is actual fact that she is realizing, then this eternity can be shown, so to say, it can be expressed. So the realization of the eternity of time gives certain effects. This means you can realize yourself in any time you want, and in any universe you want, and in any form you want. And this will be accessible for you. Is this accessible for you right now? Because there is a big difference between the idea and the actual realization. Because eternity of time, the realization of eternity of time, is the unification with the original source, with original light. In some teachings it is told or said that there are 3 steps of realization of enlightenment. The first is on the level of the mind, second is on the level of the energy, third is on the level of the consciousness of the primary source. In other teachings it is told that enlightenment cannot be divided, but the research goes deeper, and this way, by going deeper in the matter, you, so to say, experience also different matters. Basically this is just a game with words, because the processes, they are still the same which are described. And especially because of this misunderstanding of what enlightenment actually is, there are a lot of theories on this. The first point is that it is a realization of the work of the mind. So the way the mind is working becomes obvious. The second point is the absence of any kind of realization, of any kind of identification, of any kind of personification. And the third is the realization of the understanding that there is an eternal process without an end, where out of nothingness comes everything, and then everything disappears again in nothingness. So there is nothing like a static universe, no static constant appearance. The universe is discrete. It appears and disappears. It's a pulsation, it's a constant pulsation of life, of appearance and disappearance. And when our attention is swallowed, so to say, by this process, then a correct view of the world, correct paradigm appears. In other words, you learn to realize, to make out finer and finer appearances of life, of energies. So enlightenment on the level of the mind is called nirmana kaya. The question is Olga able to teach how to realize? Olga's answer is definitely yes. She doesn't tell anything that she is not able to teach. And the realization on these 3 levels in the Eastern tradition is called the realization of the existence or entity in the 3 kayas.
Okay.
And the first is on the level of the mind, that is called the nirmana kaya. And it is said to be impossible to be put in a kind of technique. It is believed to be a blessing from God. And actually this idea takes the whole life. And Olga developed a technique that allows to realize Nirmana Kaya, become aware of these processes which Olga is describing, but not only on the level of understanding of the mind, but on the level of obvious facts. And when your attention is not limited by different ideas, you start to make out finer and finer energies, and logically you become able of interacting with them. And then you become aware of Samhaba Kaya. This means the eternity of all the different appearances in the universe. And next step is you become able of interact with these energies and you then become able of unify yourself with the original energies. This is the realization of the body of light. Physical realization of immortality is already possible on the second level, Samhabakaya. But what is the difficulty here? The difficulty lies in the disbalances between our bodies. So the physical body is in one vibration, the etheric, astral, and bodies are in other vibrations. Same goes for the mental, the karmic, and for the bodhisattvic bodies. They are all in different vibrations. And our original first prototype body of light is also in a different vibration. But all of it is one and the same energy or matter. And this is the main key in all of Olga's teachings. The main point. We need to understand that we are not part of something. We are not some part of God. We don't have some sparkles or something like this. We are already this process. This is one and the same construction. You don't need to tear God apart. So since you are this already right now, then this also means that you don't need to create something or to practice a certain degree of something, just the same way you did nothing in order to create your 5 fingers on your palm. All you can do is to use it. This is a process of getting in touch with reality. But people have many ideas and thoughts which are abstracting reality, which are driving the attention away. So instead of observing how it is working, we start to fantasize how it should be working. This way, a lot of religious teachings and other spiritual teachings are created. So breathing practically is the chain which connects all these different bodies in all these different vibrations. So in other words, you could call breathing the fuel of the processes of realization. What we call physical breath is abstraction and deformation of our construction. So the way of breathing that we have right now is the appearance of destruction. And of course, the destruction is supported by this way of breathing. And if we eliminate the destruction, then logically this way of breathing changed as well. If we correct the breathing, we correct the body into something else. We tune it with something else. But the point of view that Olga opens here right now is we can, instead of this, we can correct the structure itself. And this will change the way of breathing as well. And this is a principle of non-action, non-doing. And in order to answer the question, how do we correct the structure, we need first of all to define what is breathing. So what is breathing for you actually? The physical breath. Judging from this answer, the key point here is the life force. And this is the direction that we need to go. The point is that we gain energy through this convertation, through this convertation of oxygen. And logically, this convertation, it is a moment which abstracts the flow of energy. So if we connect to the flow directly without this conversion, then we don't need the breathing. So from this point of view, we have no question about the stop of breathing, because the stop of breathing is the result of this process. So if people are holding their breath, it doesn't matter how much they are inflicting a certain force on their body. And here it is the other question that needs to be answered, how destructive or how advantages is this process, because this process is very fragile, and if you overstimulate it, it can very fast be damaged. And let's return now to the important question from the beginning, that we may go crazy. That's why Olga told that it is important in the beginning to start with enlightenment, in the beginning of this path. Because then acceptance and synchronization happens instead of force. Then we don't rush, don't enhance the process. And we simply start to enjoy all the different appearances. And Olga says that the healthiest form of practice is a practice without the desire to get any result, without the desire to realize something or to gain something, not even compassion, what is so highly put, but it is a healthy interest, a healthy desire to research. When every action is creating joy and fun, and when every action becomes a prey. But this is not a praying to someone, but it is not the position of a small child that is asking his parents for some kind of donation from the parents for good behavior or good action. What is the body right now? We have some ideas what the body is now. And the question, if we enjoy it when it becomes a light of body and a body of light, then Olga is saying that we are used to associate pleasure with the body. So we have various pleasure types which are giving us joy. Another collection of different sensations, so to say, is causing this disharmony. But the body is an idea and nothing else. We don't have a constant static body. Every moment this construction is changing, appearing and disappearing, and something similar appears. But since the mind is not able to grasp all these super high speeds, and since we have a lot of identifications, so it seems to us that we have only one and the same body, physical body. But coming to the processes which Olga is describing, the attention becomes so fine that it becomes obvious, visible. And it is indeed actually something that Olga teaches on her seminars, and it is something that is obvious to her and something that have to become obvious to her pupils. And when this process takes place, you become aware of a bigger range of possible perception, bigger collection of different sensations. And actually this is what is causing the joy and the excitement. This is what Olga called a prayer. The body that you are used to experience right now, it will change, it will also disappear. But it is not a question that what you gain, because you will gain more, not less. This is freedom. So the healthy interest in researching, this is freedom. And she's very happy that this is a question that results from her, from this conversation. Different yogi practices are existing for many centuries, and it was always connected to the transition from a master. So since the teacher understands how the process have to be, he can help the pupil in order to gain the correct results. And Western culture started to research this these processes around 300 years ago. And in the beginnings, the medicine world, the doctors started to think that when we need oxygen, and the more oxygen we get, the better it will be for us. And then they made a few inventions in order for the people to be able to gain more benefits from this. But they very soon reached the conclusion that by gaining additionally more oxygen, they are not solving any problems like diseases or illnesses. And a little bit later, by Euring Bohr, the major role of CO2 saturation in the human body was discovered in relationship to oxygen. So if you give clean oxygen to a human, this human will simply suffocate. Logically, it has to be a certain mixture of gases in which the main proportion is CO2 and oxygen. And we have an inner atmosphere. The beginning of our talk today was mostly about processes in the universe. But in order to be able to deal with them, in the first step, we need to awaken sensitivity. And this sensitivity is connected to the absence of distortion, of tension. And if Olga is talking about the destruction, dissonance between different bodies, then every destruction holds its own unique level of tension. This is what we call discomfortability and unsatisfaction. And what is also becomes later also the cause or becomes the cause of illnesses, age and death. And here it makes now sense to return to the question about the pastrika. But first Olga wants to also step into the talk about what is destruction. And Olga's task is to precisely deal with the details of this process, so it takes time. That's why the breathing, pranic breathing, the focus on breathing in our open talks will take a few more times. And here let us take one step back and talk once again about destruction, what it is. This is something that is already been told. And when Olga says that everything is light, so then in order for creation to begin, in order for all the different kind of vibrations and universes to be created, in order for all the different forms to be accessible, visible, perceptible, and their liveness in the way of the thoughts, of the sensations, of the actions, in the original light, a certain destruction, degradation has to take place. In other words, the vibration has to change, because otherwise there won't be any difference. Through the different types of information, this destruction or lowering or abstraction of vibration is taking place. And then another layer is created, and then another degradation takes place, another destruction happens, and another destruction creates another layer, and the next destruction creates the next layer. It's the same as when you have a bowl of clay, and if you don't touch this bowl of clay, it is one and the same mass. If you apply thoughts, actions, then forms are created. By fact, it stays the same clay, but the structure of this mass changed.
И на каждом уровне проявленности дыхание выражено как определенная вибрация.
And on every layer that appears, breath is expressed in a certain kind of vibration. So on the physical layer, we are speaking about the inhalation and exhalation. On the energetical level, logically, about the increase or decrease of the energy level. On the psychological level, we are speaking about decrease or increase of awareness. And on the physical level, breathing has two functions. The one is, of course, the saturation with oxygen, but on the other hand, also saturation with energy. And Olga said already that in tradition, originally the teaching was given from the master to the pupil. Because of this, it was sure that practitioner becomes aware of the processes correctly. But the Western culture took the other path, a quite technological path. So, for example, using biochemistry in order to restore regulation in the body. And especially the misunderstanding about the correct flow of the energy caused a lot of pills, so to say, to appear, but also a lot of different kinds of treatments. But the one and the other, they are practically simply turning over of the whole process that is actually taking place. So the one and the other, they are actually perversion or very strong abstraction. Olga gives credit that there are a lot of people who have a certain knowledge, have certain methods, but this knowledge and these methods, they are so much torn apart from each other. And because of this, the results which the patient gets, the patient perceives them as improvement of his progress. And here we have the example of Prastrika. Where did Camilo and Akashi took them from? From yoga. And actually it doesn't matter from which yoga you are taking it, because Kundalini, Kriya Yoga, all of them, they are built on the same. And because these yogic techniques, methods, originally were given wrong, all the following steps are leading to destruction. So what happens during Prastrika? You make a certain amount of short inhales and exhales, then you killed, because of this you killed a few millions of brain cells. At the same time you infused into your body a lot of vibration, energy that is not resonating with your individual rhythm, with your own vibration. Logically, a strong contrast appeared, and you feel this contrast and you say, oh, I feel the energy coming. But the same way you can stick your fingers into the plug, and then you get a shock from the electricity and say, I feel the energy flowing. And it will be the same use of it. It will be the same benefit. So one and the same things, they are tools in order to create a bigger disbalance in your body and destruct it. This is the main reasons why Olga is making these open talks, in order to explain you how we can not destruct ourselves, in order not to destroy ourselves by misguided authorities of methods, of techniques which are not defined by reality. Here once again Olga has to point out that this process of explanation takes time. That's why we cannot jump over certain steps and explanations. The atmosphere where we are right now, where we are born, and seems usual to us, is not suitable for the requests of our body. And when the embryo is developing in the mother's womb, in the one's blood, the degree of CO2 saturation is equal to 7.9%. But in our surroundings here right now, it is 0.03. To say it simple, if in our surrounding atmosphere right now there would be CO2 saturation of 7.9, then we already would be immortal, because we wouldn't have any distortion. In order to survive, our body is recreating the necessary amount of CO2. Olga talked already about the effect of Veriga Bohr, and this is what all the modern medicine is based on. What does it mean? Oxygen is entering the lungs, is connecting to hemoglobin in a free state, so to say. Oxygen is not present in the blood. It is always connected with hemoglobin. So if free oxygen or single or oxygen by itself appears in the blood, it will create a certain blockage, and the blood will stop. The core of hemoglobin is iron that is positively charged. Oxygen which enters our body has negative charge. That's why connection between plus and minus takes place. In this way, hemoglobin is carrying oxygen, and if in the blood the saturation of CO2 is enough, the cell disconnects oxygen from hemoglobin. And if there is not enough CO2 in the blood, then the cell simply cannot disconnect oxygen from the hemoglobin. And at the same time, even if there is a lot of oxygen in the blood, the cell will suffocate. And the cell starts to send signals to the nervous system about its suffocation. In this way, the breathing deepens. The body starts to inhale more oxygen. With every deep inhale, also a deep exhale comes. And by every big exhalation, we lose the CO2 that our body created. And this way a closed cycle appears. The deeper we breathe, the more oxygen we lose, the less oxygen the cells get. They suffocate and request for deeper breathing for more oxygen. And when suffocating, of course, dysfunction happens. In order to save some CO2, the body starts to tense the vessels. And this is a protective mechanism, that's protective mechanism from self-destruction. So by tensing the vessels, the blood circulation is slowing down in order for having more time for gaining the oxygen, disconnecting it. But a slowed down blood circulation has also a number of negative results. And in the first place, it is pollution of the blood. It means that the blood can't be cleansed in time. Also in the places where the vessels, capillaries are tensing, where spasm occurs, the blood becomes thick, and it is a good place for bacteria to grow. And what do we have? In the first place, when we inhale a big portion of oxygen, and at the same time our blood circulation is already tensed. When we inhale a big amount of oxygen, the charge impacts on the big vessels, which in the first place is aorta. And actually it means nothing. What is one single ionized charge that impacts the cells? It's nothing if it happens once, but if it takes place all the time, then it has negative consequences. And we can compare it to a lightning bolt, which strikes down and releases its charge. Same happens here. And this happens 24 hours. And in the smaller vessels, so not the primary arteria, but in the smaller vessels like in our hands, in the fingers, because of the slowed down blood circulation, the energy isn't reaching every corner. Energy isn't correctly spread. And this way it appears that we don't have enough energy in our limbs. And this is a cause for many illnesses. For example, when salt is stocked somewhere, blood thickens, or the vessels, capillaries are widened or tensed. But the most important thing is that the biorhythms of the cells, they start to function on a very unfamiliar vibration. So the cells, instead of working all together in resonance, they start to be working on different vibrations in dissonance with each other. And in the final stage, it ends with cancer. Yes, so to answer the question if there are better breathing exercises, yes, same as what Olga said a little while ago. She wouldn't state all this if she wouldn't have another option, which is better. On this alternative practices, her whole practice is built on. But the task is a little bit different right now. Olga wants you to understand the processes, that's why she explains them. A very fair question that stated right now. Olga is overjoyed, overfilled with joy that these kind of questions appear. The point here is the atmosphere of Earth changed very slowly. And the breathing system of the first inhabitants of Earth did evolutionate. Rather than evolutionating, it modernized. And since the primary source for the breathing was CO2, it stayed the primary source. But there was some addition to this. And such an addition is the mitochondria. As for today, mitochondria are organelles which are present in our cells. And the mitochondria, they have their own genetical code, DNA, which is different from our. So to put it simple, we have a foreigner or an alien in our cells. And this is a symbiotical relationship there. The mitochondria gets the oxygen and converts it into energy. Our respiratory center reacts in the amount of 50 times higher to the amount of CO2 than to the amount of oxygen. If our respiratory center would react to oxygen, then we could be speaking about why and why not the body is not learning how to resonate with oxygen. Because first of all, oxygen is not the primary source, because it is needed not for our own structures, but for the structures of the mitochondria. And secondly, because lack of oxygen as a fact doesn't exist. We have a lot of oxygen in our atmosphere. And to gain CO2, we have no other choice but to create it ourselves. So in the original atmosphere of the Earth, there were 2% oxygen and 7.9% CO2, 75% of azote and other gases. But when time passes by and certain changes happened in the life of the Earth, the atmosphere changed. And this mixture, the amounts, the relationship between the amounts in the mixture, they changed, and now we have what we have. And what happens next? We come into a world where we have 21 oxygen and 0.03 of CO2. And with the first inhale, we receive a very strong burn of the lungs. Already at this point, the first tensions appear. We receive the first destructions. Then we are fed, and the destruction occurs more. And our way of thinking is educated in a certain way. So we are not taught how to hear our body and how to build resonance with its functions. Our mind is activated, and logically our body has to adapt to these circumstances which it finds. Concerning the food, we are polluted with very heavy materials that makes our body very hard and makes it hard for the body to change, to adapt. But for our perception, for our sensitivity, the circumstances seem to be static, seem to be the only ones. We don't know anything else. Imagine you are born in the basement and lived there your whole life. You wouldn't imagine how it is to breathe fresh air. And if you have no pain, you say, I feel healthy and I feel joy about my body. But if pain occurs, we say, okay, this is not good. But we have no point to compare it with. We don't know what actually good is. And we don't know what actually health is. When the body is growing, another very important process takes place. Not only the vessels become tensed, but the bone still grows in the length that it should be. For example, your rib has to have the length of 20 centimeters. And the which are holding this has to have a length of 5 centimeters. But because of the deformation, it is 3 centimeters, for example. Logically, the position of the rib starts to change because the tendon is not in the right length. And this goes for every bone. So our bones are not in the right position. Our ribs are not in the right position. Logically, the construction of the spine becomes irritated. And along the spine, there are nervous endings and vessels. And since it has all a huge tension, it starts to disform. This way, logically, the impulse of the transference of the circuit becomes also disturbed. But the main thing, remember that when a child is born, he has the hole of Brahma opened on his skull. But this hole with some time, so to say, closes. But actually it's not closed. The bones are growing. Between the skull and the skin we have a big layer of a tendon. It's like a helmet. and the bones are growing, but the tendon is hard. And instead of expanding, they are in a rather tensed condition. That's why in the beginning this hole disappears, and then a very big pressure on the skull, on the head takes place. And then the circulation of the blood in the head gets disturbed. And the brain doesn't get enough oxygen, necessary nourishing elements, and doesn't develop to the right point. So it's not surprising that we don't feel the fine energies, or that we have a very narrowed vision, point of view, acceptance of reality. Because the body simply tries to survive. It has no interest in any kind of spiritual growth. Imagine your food is stuck somewhere, so you can't get it out. Someone passes by playing a violin and invites you in enjoying this music. But since your food is stuck and it hurts, it's not something that you are capable of enjoy right now. So why is Olga so certainly saying that the techniques which are taught as for today are killing us? We are making frequent, deep or not deep breath, but the main thing doesn't change. We make a lot of exhalation, and logically we lose CO2. So the process that Olga described right now is extremely enhanced. So the vessels get tensed even more, and the brain receives less and less oxygen and simply starts to die. On this all the techniques of deep breathing are based on. For example, rebreathing, holotropic breathing, fire breathing, gastric, bungee. And the body tries to find an exit of this condition of dying. And that's why it starts to mobilize its energies very actively and throw away everything not necessary. When a person is suffocating, first his psyche is switching off. This is one attempt of the body to solve the problem, because most of the time our own actions are resulting in negative effects. That's why in the first place our body interrupts the connection to consciousness, so to say, and for example we become unconsciousness, we faint. So some false action stop, or some false neuronal action stop. So for example, a person is very stressed, has a very nervous, active mind, and then he faints, and this way the body relaxes and reboots, so to say. If this doesn't help, the body tries to get rid of pollution, of toxins. That's why next urine is exited, then crap, and in the last instance sperm is exited as well. And after this the body dies. So for example, that's what's happening when a person is hanged. Logically, when you are doing, for example, the practices of rebreathing, when you are deep breathing, you won't reach these states. You simply can reach the half-conscious state. At this time, the attention of the dying mind, dying brain actually, isn't distracted so much. It's focused on the actual sensations going on. The vessels are tensed. That's why the pressure is very big, and we start to feel the blood movements. And additionally, a lot of energy from the ionized charges, from the discharge of the inhale. There was a permanent tension. And if there was a permanent tension that was connected to some psychological situation, for example, a person was sinking in water, of course he was suffocating, and of course he was afraid. And if this happened when this person was young, he may not remember it. But this situation caused a certain tension, and just for example, this tension closed some vessel to the liver, and after 20-30 years, this tension became an illness. So this person made this process of rebreathing, so inhaled enough, His mind starts to search similar situations in order to solve this problem, and remembers this situation when he was sinking in water, and this situation become conscious. He become aware of this situation, and after the body recovers and this tension was eliminated, altogether this tension from the liver may also go away. So the blood circulation recovers and the liver restores. And the person says, great technique, it helped me a lot. But this is the solution of one certain condition. It has nothing to do with global change, with global processes. And during the execution of this practice, the body was destroyed. The body underwent a certain destruction. That's why when Grove developed his holotropic breathing, he was a doctor, so he understood these processes very good. And he said that more than 10 times you shouldn't be using this practice because this is destructive. And additionally, he was using LSD in order for the mind to be more calm and switched off, so to say. When it was spread by Leonard Orr, who was not a doctor, and he didn't understood all these processes, but he based his actions on the possibility of getting in touch with some very deep traumas. Since this practice is very easy, it became also very widely spread. But very seldom it is told how many negative effects this can have. What happens with the physiology? That takes a practice of in our case. You breathe frequently and deep. You disturb the balance between CO2 and oxygen, and the body needs time to restore this portion of CO2 in the body. And it switches off in the respiratory center the need for another inhalation because you have enough oxygen, you don't need more. So that's why you can, after this execution of this technique, you can hold your breath for quite a long time. That's why the more CO2 you gather, normalization is taking place and logically pleasant sensations occur. So basically you disturb the situation, and as you recover, that's the sensations that you perceive as improvement. What actually is saving you from further harm is that you execute this hopefully once a week or maybe once a year. That's why most of the people simply don't have time to do more harm. But if you do it on a regular basis, you will have a heart attack. And there are plenty of examples for this. And Olga receives letters from people who have practiced this intensely and now are asking for help in order to restore their health. And what Olga is telling, it is not a secret. It is what is known to every medic, what knows every doctor, what is open, accessible for society. And there are two factors. The first is that people are asking for spiritual education. And secondly, it is a misunderstanding of the teacher and also the greed and ignorance. First of all, it's not a question if it is better. Here is a question about the individual rhythm of the breathing, and this is a big topic, and this is something that we will discuss further. It's like you want to surprise someone with something absurd, and he is told middle temperature from each hospital. We all are different, but we try to make the processes equal. Breathe less. What does it mean to breathe less? How can you make sure what amount of inhale you need in order for your body to function well? And don't forget that in different conditions your norm changes as well, and you have different needs. For example, on the beach, or you are doing some mind work, and this is indeed a very big topic, and we will do it next time. No, you can't. Categorically not. It's indeed like we are in the basement and we don't know what health is. We don't have a point that we can compare with. That's why in the beginning of the practices which Olga gives, we work with numbers in order to make sure that we have the correct individual norm of ours mathematically concluded. And then we feel what is our individual breathing norm and then abide to it. Only then we can say that our intuition is 100% correct. If you have concrete names, then it would be better. But in general, because there are no alternatives, that's why Olga is saying that what she is teaching is revolutionary. But she would put the question a little bit different. And to go deeper, the point here is that the original teachings, they are not built on deep breathing. They are built on pranic breathing. The original teachings, they are not based on physical breathing, they are based on pranic breathing, where the physical is absent. And then everything, absolutely everything is correctly and no questions appear. This is Olga's main message. It is not only in order to give new techniques, but to come back to these original techniques. Because all the techniques are based not on the idea of a certain action, but based on our physiology. Any kind of technique is in the first place a description of physiology. Physiology not only of the physical body, but logically also of the energetical and psychological and so on. And when the distortions are eliminated, we arrive in the reality. The teachings have been distorted, and this is a topic that we definitely have to discuss. And of course, Olga can not only tell, but also explain and show and teach you this. We provide also the introductory lecture on pranic breathing. From another point of view, Olga tells they're the same as here, but in also with additional information, and you can hear it as well. And Olga would be happy to hear your questions concerning this topic and answer them next time.